I'm joined by Representative Liz Cheney of the House Armed Services Committee because she and I have shared a point of view on Afghanistan for 20 years. And this is a dark and grim week. Congressman Cheney, welcome back. What do you think is happening?
Hi, Hugh. Well, thank you for having me back. And you're exactly right. And what's happening is not a surprise. It's what was clear would happen. It is, in many ways catastrophic. The United States had approximately 2,500 forces in Afghanistan conducting counterterrorism, counterinsurgency mission, working very closely with the Afghans to help to ensure the Taliban was not able to establish this kind of control of territory, to ensure the Taliban and their close allies, continued allies, fighting partners, Al-Qaeda, did not get themselves into a position where they could have free reign and set up safe havens again for terrorist training camps of the kind we saw prior to 9/11. President Biden made the decision to withdraw all of our forces, and what we're seeing now is the consequence of that, and it really is devastating.
Liz Cheney, I was probably the most vocal proponent of President Bush and Vice President Cheney's policy, and I believe we should have treated Afghanistan like South Korea, that we should have been there as long as it took because proximity to Iran and China and Russia, the critical necessity of keeping terrorists out, and yet it seems like they're not fighting for themselves. These are not battles. These are just surrenders. They're not in the trenches. They're not dying to the last man. It doesn't seem like they are willing, after 20 years, to sacrifice anything except American lives and treasure.
Well, I think you've got to recognize the circumstances that the Afghan forces are facing now. For example, they have been able to rely on U.S. air power. Being able to fight the Taliban when you can count on our air power is a whole different thing than the situation we're in today. The military and the administration kept saying, and frankly, the Trump administration was saying the same thing because President Trump wanted to do this. President Biden did do it. It was wrong then and it's wrong now. But kept saying, we'll have forces stationed over the horizon. We can provide help if it's needed. Over the horizon turns out to be, 7-8 hours away. So being in a situation where America has abandoned our allies in Afghanistan, NATO is following suit, we've basically left the Afghans to the control of the Taliban. And it is a brutal, horrific terrorist organization, and we're seeing what's happening now. They're moving in, and obviously what they're doing to the women is just disgraceful. They're trying to hollow out civil society. They're killing tribal elders. They're shutting down radio stations. They're conducting targeted killings of people involved in media and culture, people who are working to stop this kind of radical Islamic emirate from being established. But it is at the end of the day going to demonstrate to be very bad for U.S. national security interests and certainly for our allies and for the people of Afghanistan, I'm afraid.
Now, Congresswoman Cheney, for 17 years, I've held 2 fundraisers a year for the Semper Fi Fund because 2,312 U.S. military personnel died in Afghanistan. 20,066 have been seriously wounded and continue to require, and we should continue to provide care for them. Did they fight in vain after 20 years? Was it all for naught?
No, absolutely not. The fact that for 20 years we were able to prevent terrorist safe havens from being established, we were able to help to work with the Afghan government. They kept us safe for all of these years from further terrorist attacks from the soil of Afghanistan. So certainly not in vain. However, I do think that the decision that President Biden's made, this withdrawal, isn't worthy of the sacrifices that they've made. And, when you look just at how the State Department, for example, is handling this, it's an embarrassment, and it has a huge impact on America's standing around the world. The State Department is setting up, hashtags and saying the Taliban has an interest in coming to the table, let's negotiate. The Taliban isn't going to do anything like that. The Taliban now has got the momentum to conduct this massive military offensive. I think last I saw they control at this point something like 2/3 of the territory. And for the American State Department superpower, leader of the world, to be, have our spokesman up there talking about hashtags, it makes us a laughing stock. So we really do have to get back to the place where our allies can count on us, where they know we're going to stand with them, we're not going to abandon them, and we're going to conduct our foreign policy in a way that's worthy of the men and women in uniform who sacrificed so much for all of us.
Secretary, I actually believe that Secretary Blinken going on the radio was a disaster, because they had grudging respect for Mike Pompeo. They had great respect for President Bush, some grudging respect for Hillary Clinton. They were afraid of wave after wave of B-52 bombers or something worse when we were in Bagram. I thought we could have just withdrawn to Bagram and held them at bay, but now we're gone. And the question becomes, what do we do with the American military? And the budget that the Democrats passed on the Senate 2 nights ago leaves me completely dispirited. We will have spent $7 trillion by the end of this year, and I don't think 1% of that is going to America's defense, Congresswoman.
Leah, look, I mean, this budget and the reckless spending on everything basically but defense it's really horrifying. And, you have a situation where the United States government has one single most important obligation above everything else, and that's to defend the nation. We have seen year after year military leaders, the civilian leaders of the Pentagon, both parties tell us what is necessary, and that is at a minimum 3 to 5% real growth annually in that budget. And that was what was necessary in order to carry out the national defense strategy of 3 or 4 years ago. So our adversaries in the meantime have made huge advances, and we are not right now conducting ourselves in a way, making the investments we need to maintain military supremacy. And without that, we lose our ability to deter our adversaries. We lose our ability to be able to build the kind of alliances we need to stand against the China threat, the Russia threat, Iran, North Korea. And people, they just will walk away and say, well, you can't count on the Americans anymore. And that will lead to a very dangerous world, and one that we certainly don't want to have to live in.
Your counterpart across the aisle, Congresswoman Luria, is a rational Democrat. She's from Virginia Beach. Now, the Hewitts are a Navy family. Virginia Beach needs a serious budget. We need civilian shipyards to be invested in, real infrastructure. How does she expect to get reelected when they don't even spend in the infrastructure bill money on civilian shipyards and public shipyards, when they don't do anything? Does she really expect Virginia Beach to reelect her?
Well, look, I think that is a question, certainly it's a question that we've got to deal with across the country. Virginia Beach is a great example, but, we need to look at our military industrial base and look at the kinds of investments that are necessary across the board. So I think that you will see the Armed Services Committee tends to be one of the least partisan committees. But this year we're going to have some very major and significant debates and policy battles over just this issue.
But these Democrats can't have it both ways, can they?
Right.
They can't say,
right.
I'm an armed services hawk, and then vote for the Bernie Sanders budget, right? You can't have it both ways.
You can't. That's exactly right. If you want to really do what's necessary to defend the nation, you have to support the investments, and that means you've got to support a budget that provides the kind of growth that's necessary. You have to support a top line that provides the kind of growth that's necessary. I mean, there's reality and there's rhetoric, and when it comes to the defense of the nation, it has severe consequences if you engage in the political rhetoric, but you don't back it up with the support for the kind of budget numbers we need.
Last question. Are you optimistic about defeating the Bernie Sanders? But they've only got 5 votes. They can barely lose 2 congressmen. Are there enough sane Democrats? It's like Abraham arguing with the angel not to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. If I can find 5, don't destroy the Congress. Do you think you can find 5?
Boy, I sure hope so, Hugh. I mean, I think this budget puts them in such a difficult position. I think you see that in terms of what's happening inside their caucus, the fact that the moderate Democrats who are facing tough reelection fights don't want to have to take this vote. They want to be able to vote on infrastructure. And there's a reason for that, because this is just an unbelievable set of wasteful spending. So I'm hopeful we will be able to have at least 5 sane folks on the other side on this budget issue.
Good luck. You are playing Abraham to the Democratic Congress. I hope you get there. Liz Cheney, great to have you back, Representative. Don't go anywhere, America. I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show.